I mentioned earlier, Reserve Bank Governor Philip Lowe has fronted Senate estimates and he's issued a fresh inflation warning.
What we're trying to do is to remind people of our seriousness of getting inflation back down. So if we've got an inflation mentality, firms are more likely to put their prices up, they're more likely to agree to big wage increases, and workers are more likely to see it. And if that happens, the inflation becomes entrenched. And we know from history, if inflation becomes entrenched, it's very costly. It will lead to higher interest rates and more unemployment. So I know the higher interest rates at the moment are very unpopular and they're hurting people. You know, I know it's really tough, but we, in our board discussions, think of the alternative. If we had not increased interest rates broadly as we have, inflation would be higher for longer, expectations would adjust, would become entrenched, and the end result would be even higher interest rates, more pain and more unemployment. So what we're doing now is difficult, but it's necessary to avoid more pain and even higher interest rates later on.
Joining me now is Liberal MP Michael Sukkar. Michael, thank you very much for your time. What's your take on the RBA Governor's appearance at Senate estimates today?
Well, tellingly, Amanda, after he made those remarks, we saw the latest ABS data, which shows that inflation, I should say, has actually increased and it's now tracked up to 6.8%. So we see very stubborn inflation, and clearly what is occurring is the government has lost control, partly because of their high spending agenda, which means we'll have higher inflation for longer. And as your viewers will know, Amanda, that means that the Reserve Bank's got no choice but to keep interest rates higher for longer. Now, that could mean interest rates rise even further. And if they do, it will be because of the actions of this Labor government.
Philip Lowe seems like he's being polite, but that entrenched inflation about which he talks seems to be borne out by the data we're seeing today. And the real driver here is, as you say, the big spending agenda of this government. Speaking of the RBA, the board is set to meet on Tuesday, and in all likelihood, rates will probably go up again. You've mentioned the fresh data out today that makes that inflation pressure increased as they go toward that meeting. Isn't this just going to cause more stress for households that are already doing it so tough?
Well, this was the point we were making when Labor outlined their budget and a number of the decisions they've taken since they've been in government, that fueling higher spending that the government was doing in the end was going to hurt Australians. And the way it was going to hurt Australians is just what we're seeing now. Inflation pushing up interest rates. What the government needed to do was to show disciplined financial management, but also to avoid kowtowing to the unions. I mean, one of the most inflationary things that hasn't even hit yet will be its industrial relations changes, which were just a payback for the millions and millions of dollars that the militant unions throw at the Labor Party. That's going to fuel inflation even further, and that doesn't commence until the 1st of July. So that is going to be coming through the system over coming months and years. And finally, I would say Labor's ideological obsessions around energy have meant that Australians are paying hundreds, if not thousands of dollars more for their gas and electricity. Again, that's not something you can easily cut out of your budget. So Australians are getting whacked at every turn by poor decisions of this government. And it's really sad to see that it could even get worse in coming meetings of the Reserve Bank.
You're quite right to observe that Australia's productivity is already subpar, and the effect of these second tranche industrial relations reforms is only going to make it worse. The outcome that you get with that is inflation every day of the week. Let's chat briefly about the housing crisis. Phil Lowe today had an interesting solution on offer to the housing and rental crisis facing the country. He suggested staying home or getting a housemate. Take a look at this.
So I've got a lot of people coming into the country.
A lot of people coming
wanting
into the
to live
country
alone
very
or kind of not move out of home, and it just doesn't. It doesn't work.
Higher rents
do lead people to economise on housing, don't they? Kids don't move out of home because the rent's too expensive, or you decide to get a flatmate or a housemate because it's so. That's the price mechanism at work.
It's a pretty sad conception of the Australian dream, isn't it, Michael? Just get yourself a housemate?
It's utterly embarrassing for the government that the Reserve Bank governor would have to say that. I mean, I think his comments just indicate how little confidence any of us have in this government when it comes to housing. The hapless housing minister, whose very thin agenda is already in tatters. This government announced just in October that they were going to deliver 1 million homes over 5 years. They never mentioned that 1 million homes is just business as usual, by the way, that we'd been doing that prior to their election. But notwithstanding that pretty thin commitment in the budget, they're not going to meet that 1 million home target. They're going to fall way short of that. They've got no plan for first home buyers, no plan for supply. And there was comical scenes in the Parliament when I asked a question about what is Labor going to do with housing 1.5 million migrants who are coming to Australia over the next 5 years. The minister got up and said, well, we're going to set up our $10 billion fund to build 30,000 homes over that 5 years. Now, I don't know how 1.5 million people could possibly live in 30,000 homes. Maybe the Reserve Bank governor has been.
It's a lot of housemates, Michael. It's a lot of housemates.
Lots of housemates. Lots of housemates. So, this is the craziness. And, I come from a migrant family. We like planned migration in Australia, but it's got to be planned. And you can't bring in 1.5 million new people to this country unless there's going to be 1.5 million homes to house them. And clearly that's not going to happen under this government.
Well, Michael Sukkar, I haven't forgotten, as a plumber's daughter, what you did to keep the residential construction industry going through COVID and the difference you made to people who wanted to get into their own place at an affordable price. Hopefully Australians can remember policies like that and how they worked. Michael Sukkar, thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks so much, Amanda.